Bulletcast for life.
Welcome, boys and girls, to episode 10 of Under the Radar. My name is Brandon, and I very much appreciate y'all for downloading this podcast and listening to it. And on today's episode, we will be going over the latest happenings of the G1 Climax, as well as NXT TV and the WWE reality shows we all know and love, the season finale of Total Bellas, and the second episode of Miz and Mrs. But first, let's talk about a little bit of news that we didn't cover on the Bulletcast last week. There are reports circulating that possibly Shinsuke Nakamura might be leaving WWE to go back to New Japan. We all know the big raid that happened a few years ago with AJ Styles, Nakamura, and Machine Gun Carl Anderson, as well as Doc Gallows going over to WWE. And it seems like the three Americans will be re-signing, maybe if they haven't already re-signed. But there are some thoughts out there that possibly Nakamura might be going back to New Japan. And that seems very interesting to me. Nakamura is up there in age. Let's see, a little Google search real quick. He is 38 years old, so he's not a young lion anymore. He don't exactly know how much money he's making in WWE compared to New Japan, but I assume he's making a lot more money in WWE than he did. We've kind of talked about it on the Bulletcast ever since, the Bulletcast has even started, about how I've had high expectations for Shinsuke. He hasn't really delivered to those expectations, but that just might be him getting up there in age and thinking about how he's just there to collect a paycheck. Nothing wrong with that. He's put in his time. He's had great matches over in Japan. He had that phenomenal match with Sami Zayn at Takeover Dallas 2 years ago, and now it's just interesting because, what does Shinsuke value more? Does he want to go back to New Japan just because that's where he lived for most of his life? He wants to take his family back there to Japan, have a nice, easy life. Maybe WWE life wasn't all it cracked up to be, or possibly he just feels creatively stifled. I don't think that's the case. I think Shinsuke, especially ever since his heel turn, kicking everybody in the nutsack, I think Shinsuke's been really good lately on television as a babyface. I think he's been kind of bland, especially on the WWE product. NXT, there's still some holes there. He didn't really live up to his expectations there as well, but I think it's just he had such a high bar that he set in New Japan that coming over here in America for WWE, it was really hard for someone to match that intensity, especially with the different schedules that happen. WWE, it's a weekly, daily grind. With New Japan, you're on for 2 weeks, off for 2 weeks, and so on and so forth. So that's one of the reasons why the New Japan talent can go so hard throughout the year, even though the New Japan style is much more grueling than the WWE style. They have far less TV shows or big matches that they have to prepare for. There's probably maybe half a dozen major shows for New Japan that a lot of the major talents are on. There's also, there's a G1, there's the Best of Super Juniors, there's some other minor shows and tournaments that go on as well. But Shinsuke going over to New Japan, we'll have to wait and see. That's a little beginning story happening thus far. I think his contract ends at the end of the year, or not the end of the year next year, sometime next year. And we all know about the Daniel Bryan situation. We have Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, and Cody's contracts coming up by the end of the year, so that's something to look out for. If I was to put a percentage on any of, or if I'd pick a favorite for someone to leave, I think it probably would be maybe Daniel Bryan, number one, then Shinsuke, and then out of the three indie guys, I think probably Cody is the most likely, followed by the Young Bucks, and then Kenny. I think Kenny he's finally got his shot in New Japan right now. I think he might re-sign this year. Unless if WWE, since they have those TV contracts now, they can just throw stupid money at anybody. And if they give Kenny, twice or three times as much as what he's making in New Japan, I wouldn't blame Kenny for jumping ship and going over there and, giving him some dumb gimmick. As long as the check clears and you're making $2 million when you're only making $1 million or 750 grand over in New Japan. Tell me what you want me to do, boss, and I'll do it as long as you pay me. So, speaking of Kenny Omega in New Japan, let's go on to the G1 Climax results. I don't exactly remember the last. I believe it was night 7 is when we last left off. So we'll be going night 8. This was on July 26th. And the B block, I've been saying this for the past couple weeks. It's my favorite block. There's so many great wrestlers on this card, on this block. So let's jump into it. Hiroki Goto beat Toreano. I mean, just exactly what you would expect. Goto beat Yano, not falling for most of his shenanigans. Tetsuya Naito beats Tama Tonga. Once again, the Tongans are just interfering with everybody. We had a little more LIJ firing squad beef going on here. Zack Sabre Jr. versus Tomohiro Ishii. Fantastic match. Zack Sabre Jr. wins this one. I said it once again, Ishii, probably my favorite wrestler in the tournament right now, just delivering fantastic matches with almost everybody he's in the ring with. He's not winning any of them, or he's not winning most of them. He beat Goto. Did he beat Goto? I believe. This is kind of like the middle third of the G1 Climax. This is kind of like the dog days. You kind of put the matches that aren't that desirable kind of right here in the middle. I mean, these matches are all really good, but it's definitely shown on the A block that we will get into, where it's kind of the less desirable matches. Yoshihashi going up against the top two guys in Okada and Tanahashi, and we all know that he's not going to beat him. So they deliver good matches, but it's just not going to be as eventful as some of the other shows, as a annoying phone is ringing in the background. I need to get a soundproof studio, but we're just not making that much money right now. So next up we have Kenny Omega defeating Juice Robinson. Another great match. Juice has just been the underdog, even though he's a champion. I forget if at this point he hasn't won a match up to this point, but I know he gets a victory eventually. But Kenny and Juice puts on a fantastic match. Kenny, of course, goes over in the end, continuing his unbeaten streak. And then in the main event, we have Sanada defeating Kota Ibushi. A fantastic match. Sanada, one of the surprises in the tournament, not in terms of his performances, but just in terms of his victories that he's been getting. He beat Kota Ibushi. He's been, going over in a lot of these big matches. He's main eventing some of these matches. I thought possibly he would go over and beat Kenny, but that was just not the case, as we see in the next B block action. But definitely one of the matches to go out of your way to see. Just great chain wrestling, great power moves going back and forth between the two, high flying, just everything you would think that Ibushi and Sanada would do, they did on this show. So next up we have night 9. We have Michael Elgin going up against Minoru Suzuki. Minoru Suzuki is going to win this one. A little bit of a disappointment, just kind of the two guys going back and forth with hard strikes. In the end, Minoru Suzuki gets the Gotch pile driver for the victory. Good match, but they probably could have done better. Then we have Evil defeating Hangman Page. Hangman Page continues to get over with the Japanese crowd despite losing all of his matches. Just another solid match between the two. Evil going over, not a big surprise here. Hangman Page putting in good efforts. I'm not going to say he's over here like Sanada or Ishii just having show stealers or anything like that, but he's first G1 just getting his gimmick over. And facing guys like Evil, putting in good matches, it definitely helps his cause down the line for eventually getting a IC or heavyweight championship match. So then we have Bad Luck Fale defeating Jay White. Kind of a letdown for Jay White. He's been on a roll lately, and then he ends up losing to Bad Luck Fale. Of course, Fale has the Tongans in his corner, and that's one of the reasons. That is the reason why he was able to defeat Jay White. A little bit of definitely a disappointment here. I thought. There's been so many disqualifications. I don't know if New Japan wants to get them disqualified for everyone, but it's just kind of those things of once you kind of open up Pandora's box. New Japan rarely ever disqualifies people, and we've seen so many disqualifications now that when they keep doing the same thing over and over again, and they don't disqualify them, it kind of makes you angry at the promotion or the referee for why didn't you disqualify them when you've done that for other matches and maybe even less of what they're doing right now. So just Bad Luck Fale is not going to give you a great match or a really good match in any of these real matches here, but just kind of disappointing seeing Jay White lose here. I understand Jay White is probably not going to win the G1, but I think you can have him. I mean, he beat Okada, he beat Tanahashi and Minoru Suzuki, or he lost to Minoru Suzuki, but it's just like you can have him lose against other guys. I don't know if having Bad Luck Fale and everybody in the firing squad just beat him up, and then having it's complicated, I guess. So next up, we have Hiroshi Tanahashi going up with Togi Makabe. I mean, we've seen this match a bunch. Tanahashi goes over to beat Makabe. Good match, nothing real special here. We've seen them wrestle a bunch of times. And then in the main event, we have Yoshihashi in a main event going up against Kazuchika Okada, and of course Kazuchika Okada goes over. Good match between the two. I've said in the past, Yoshihashi steps it up, especially when he has his big matches. We all know Yoshihashi ain't going to win this, so it was a good match, but it definitely had that hindering in its believability and its near falls. But Okada continues to be crazy. He has his balloons that he lets go of, and he hit Rocky Romero in the face one time. So let's go on to night 10. And this is in the B block. First up, we have, as I scroll down here, all these tag team matches. Here we go. Sabre Jr. defeating Tama Tonga in 11 minutes. More disqualifications. And Tama Tonga gets disqualified here. So just more stuff between the two. The kind of disappointing thing is with Tama Tonga. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say Tama Tonga's a great wrestler or anything like that, but he's definitely a really good wrestler. I feel like there's moments in his matches where they can have good back and forths, and I can understand you having this with Bad Luck Fale, even though he is kind of the muscle and the bigger guy in the group. But Tama Tonga, I feel like he could at least have good matches. He can have a real good match for the first 10 minutes of the match, and then finally have the disqualification in the very end, which is basically what's been happening, but I just don't feel like the wrestling part leading up to that has been fantastic. I think it also kind of is hindered by the fact that we all know that we're just waiting for the disqualification or the interference to happen eventually, so that's kind of taken aback some of the Tama Tonga matches and the Bad Luck Fale matches, but definitely I feel like Tama Tonga, as kind of the de facto leader of this group, should be more believable or more, I don't know if I'd say protected in the ring. Just I feel him being more of a threat, I feel like, because Bad Luck Fale, at least he has the size on his side. Tama Tonga is kind of an average size wrestler. He's still, bigger than guys like Sabre Jr., but I gotta wait and see. I have faith in New Japan's booking to see what is going on, especially with what is the firing squad going to do at Wrestle Kingdom. Is it just going to be one big tag team match of the firing squad up against the sort of leftovers of the Bullet Club who don't have a singles match? Because we all know Kenny's going to have one. Young Bucks are probably going to have the heavyweight championships tag titles to defend, so it's probably going to be like Hangman Page, Chase Owens, and Yujiro Takahashi or something like that. The next up, we have Juice Robinson defeating Toreano. Fun match, just Toreano with his shenanigans, as always, kind of plays in well with Juice because both of them are kind of goofy characters. Juice finally gets off the schneid, and it was a comedy match. I don't know if I'd say it was a great comedy match by any means, but if you saw this on the card, you definitely knew that this was going to happen, and it happened. So then we have Kota Ibushi defeating Tomohiro Ishii. One of my favorite matches in the entire tournament right here. This match was crazy. Them going just back and forth, power bombs and lariats, and Kota Ibushi jumping off of the top turnbuckle onto the floor, just killing himself. I don't want to go move for move because it's going to take up a lot of time. I still got 2 more nights to cover, but like one of my favorite matches of the show or of the whole tournament. So definitely, I think if you're spare for time, definitely go out of your way and watch this one. Night 10, Kota Ibushi and Tomohiro Ishii. So next up we have Tetsuya Naito and Hiroki Goto. Good match between the two. A Naito match and Goto, I don't have super high expectations for, but It was a fine match between the two, and so Tetsuya Naito going over, kind of keeping pace with Kenny Omega, still 2 points behind him, but Kenny Omega still holds the tiebreaker. And then next up, we have Kenny Omega defeating Sonata in 20 minutes. One of the possible upsets I had going into this of the people who could end up defeating Kenny Omega, because, as they said before, they'd never had a champion go, or they've never had anybody go undefeated in the G1 Climax. And I don't remember. I think it's been a real long time since the champion has won the G1. I think it's been maybe like 15 years at this point. So Kenny's trying to do two historic things in one tournament. This match was crazy. Another great match. I wouldn't say it was as good as the or Ibushi match the 2 nights before, the night before, in terms of Block B action, but definitely a great match. So I definitely would recommend seeing Night 10. I don't want to be so hard on the Block A, but definitely if you need to watch most, if not all, the Block B matches, because they're all just kind of different. The Yano match is going to be kooky and funny and stuff like that. Tama Tonga matches, I think, are kind of the ones you can skip, just because you kind of know it's kind of been formulaic up to this point. This is the 5th night of action in the B block, so we kind of know it's going to be, decent back and forth action, and then disqualification or interference at the end. But the next match I will get in with Tama Tonga, I thought the interference was really good in terms of the drama that happened during the match. But let's go on to night 11, Block A action. We have, Bad Luck Fale defeating Togi Makabe. More interference, and Bad Luck Fale gets another win. Poor Togi Makabe, I believe that eliminates him from contention. And so Jay White and Hangman Page. Jay White ends up going over in this, so Hangman Page still is having a tough time in the G1. Hangman Page only getting 1 victory up to this point. And at the end of this, I will go over the standings and kind of talk my way through what I think is going to happen up to this point after 6 matches on both the A and the B blocks. So Jay White and Hangman Page had a good match. I don't know if I would say it was better than the match they had in Long Beach earlier this year for the championship. The finish was kind of meh. Jay White low blows Page when the referee wasn't looking, and he hits the Blade Runner for the win. So it was an okay match. Next up, we have Minoru Suzuki going up against Evil. 2 badasses going up against each other, just beating the hell out of each other. Minoru Suzuki ends up getting the win. They just go back and forth. Suzuki hits the Gotch Pile Driver, and that is that. Then Yoshihashi goes up against the other of the big 2 in this block, and that is Hiroshi Tanahashi. And Tanahashi, of course, gets the victory. So kind of the same thing I said in the Okada match, just kind of hard seeing Yoshihashi getting a victory over Tanahashi. Kind of hard saying both those names back and forth because they're basically almost the same name. But good match between the two. But one of the better matches that has happened in the A block is Kazuchika Okada defeating Michael Elgin in the main event of this show. Fantastic match, going back and forth. I don't know what to say anymore. Just they're great matches. You kind of seen they just kind of make up kind of similar but different spots in all these different matches. When you see the same guys wrestle, not the same guys, but the same, a person wrestle big matches for 9 nights, it kind of can get formulaic, but not in the G1. They end up to kind of switching little things up here and there, and they all have, all the different guys have different styles, so it kind of helps them do with different counters and different finishing sequence. A great main event, and definitely lived up to the expectations of these two. So as of right now, Hiroshi Tanahashi is leading the entire pack with 10 points. Evil, Okada, and Minoru Suzuki all tied with 8 points. Jay White also has 8 points. So we have Evil, Okada, Suzuki, and Jay White just 2 points behind Tanahashi. Then we have Bad Luck Fale sitting dead in the middle with 6 points. Michael Elgin, Togi Makabe with 4 points. And Hangman Page and Yoshihashi down there with only 2 points. So, obviously, I think Bad Luck Fale is not eliminated from contention yet, but Elgin, Makabe, Page, and Hashi are all done. So, as of right now, I think the only top contenders, realistically, are, the people with Tanahashi with 10 points, and the 4 who are tied in second place with 8 points. Jay White and Suzuki, Jay White has the tiebreaker over Tanahashi if they do end up tying, and he also has a tiebreaker over Okada, but then Suzuki. I mean, this is what kind of gets very difficult and very complicated with all these matches and all these different points totals, because if there is a tie, then there's tiebreakers and blah, 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 blah. So, as of right now, I think definitely the final night of Block A action is going to come down to Okada and Tanahashi. Okada, lost his first couple matches, but then now he's kind of getting on of a roll. He's still kind of in a funk a little bit, so it's going to be fun to see what happens on that last night. Is it going to be a straight up Tanahashi versus Okada? Winner goes on to be the winner of the Block A block, or is it like if somebody wins and then somebody else wins and then something? It's going to be fun to see what happens there. Jay White, obviously, if he didn't have that loss to Bad Luck Fale, he would be up there at 10 points. So, I mean, I feel like him losing a Hangman Page probably would have been a little bit better choice than losing a Bad Luck Fale, just because I think Hangman Page is kind of on the up and up, and this can be kind of Page's one big victory, especially since they had the U.S. title match back a couple months ago. You can kind of get his win back, I would say, but I mean, Bad Luck Fale just kind of stuck there in the middle with 6 points, not out of contention, but definitely not a favorite to go on and win the G1. God, I hope Fale is not in the finals, but I don't think he will. So, if you're gonna tell me for one person to go on to the finals, I think it's definitely going to be between Tanahashi and Okada. I don't think Okada is going to win the whole thing regardless. I just think it's going to be, he almost gets there and then he loses again. So I think it's just depending on when you want to tell that story. Do you want to tell that in the semifinals or in the finals of the G1? I think telling in the semifinals is probably a good story to tell, just because he was almost there, but he wasn't quite there. So I think Tanahashi getting it in the end, going up to face either Naito, Okada, or Omega, or Ibushi in the finals of the G1 would be a cool story, possibly, but I definitely think it'll be between Tanahashi and Okada. So onwards to night 12. This was 2 nights ago. There was a Block A show that happened earlier this morning, but we will not cover that just because it's a little simpler to talk about A and B blocks, and since this is the last show for the B block, we're just going to finish it up right there. So, the first match we have is Tama Tonga defeating Tomohiro Ishii. A lot of interferences in this, but I felt like it worked quite well. There was 2 real good near falls after interference from the Fireman Squad that Ishii kicked out of. It worked great with the crowd. The crowd was fired up for it. Ishii kicked out again, and then he fired up, but then Tama Tonga hit a gun stun on Ishii, and he gets the victory. Once again, it was kind of those things that I said earlier where there was so much interference, you're kind of wondering, why isn't the referee disqualifying Tama Tonga? But because there was both instances, they pulled the referee out, and they throw him back in there. And so why didn't the referee disqualify him? Because they've done far less. They've done less than that, and you still disqualified him. So just one of those things. But I think just on Ishii's side of it, kicking out and firing up, I thought it worked for him. I still am not a big fan of Tama Tonga and the Firing Squad getting all these interferences. So next up, we have Juice Robinson defeating Sonata. Yes, Juice Robinson getting a very big victory over Sonata. The story of this match, as well as all the other matches, that Juice Robinson cannot use his left hand as a weapon since it has that soft cast on. So they go back and forth, great wrestling between the two, and then in the end, Juice Robinson takes off his cast, teases hitting his left punch, and he misses, and then they go back and forth for a little bit, but then Juice Robinson ends up hitting his left hook and hitting a Pulp Friction for the victory. Very good match between the two. Like the kind of out of nowhere, Juice Robinson, takes the cast off, he teases going forward, and then they go back and forth for a little bit, and he hits a quick little hook or jab for the victory. So next up we have Tetsuya Naito going up against Toreano. Naito didn't want any of his Toreano shenanigans. They kind of go back and forth. Yano trying to be serious, but then he also goes back in his bag of tricks. He takes off the turnbuckle. He hits Naito, whips him in the corner a couple times. Probably the most believable near fall for Yano over Naito. There was a spot where Yano pulled out the tape, but then it backfired, and Naito tapes Yano's wrist to one of the barricades, and Yano's almost going to get disqualified, but because he can't take the tape off, but he takes the entire section of the barricade and jumps in the ring with it. Fun match back and forth. Tetsuya Naito wins with the Destino for the victory. Can't complain. Decent little comedy / serious match. And then next up we have Kenny Omega defeating Zack Sabre Jr., one of the other people that you could arguably see defeating Kenny Omega, but Kenny Omega keeps going as the undefeated champion in the G1. A funny twist to see here, or a interesting twist to see, is what's going to happen with Kenny Omega going forward. Talked about it last week, how he had the heel injury. He talked about it on Being the Elite. And then Zack Sabre Jr. just kept going after that leg, just kept getting heel hooks and knee bars and, Boston crabs, half crabs, just so many submissions back and forth. The counters and all the other stuff that Sabre was doing. There was 2 times where Omega went for a V-trigger, Sabre catches it, puts him in a knee bar. It was fantastic. Great match. Zack Sabre Jr. was definitely dominant throughout the entire match, and Omega was kind of working from underneath. Zack Sabre Jr. was going for something. Omega counters it, hits him with a roll-up, and Kenny Omega gets not a fast victory, but he gets an out-of-nowhere victory. Good match between the two. One of my favorites, just because it was so different. A lot of Zack Sabre Jr., submissions here, and Omega was definitely selling the leg going forward. It's going to be interesting to see if that's one of the reasons why he might slip up and lose a match or two, because right now he holds a decisive lead. He has the tiebreaker over Naito. The Ibushi match going forward on the last night, it's going to be interesting to see what the ramifications are for that. So, speaking of Ibushi, he goes on and defeats Hiroki Goto. Good match between the two in the main event. I wouldn't say it was as good as the Omega Zack Sabre Jr. match, but Ibushi doing crazy things, Goto using his power moves. Great match back and forth. I wouldn't say it was one of my favorite Ibushi matches of the tournament, but it was a really fun match. It probably didn't help that I was really tired and I was falling asleep, not because the match was boring, just because I was tired. So that probably took away a little bit of it, but go out and watch it for yourself and tell us how you thought about it. So after 6 matches in the books, we have Kenny Omega at 12, Tetsuya Naito at 10. Kota Ibushi with 8, Sonata, Zack Sabre Jr. with 6, Ishii and Juice Robinson at 4, Tama Tonga and Toreano at 2. So I believe after 6 matches, there's 3 more to go. I believe Sonata, Sabre, and everybody else is kind of pseudo-eliminated. Maybe not just yet, but definitely Ishii, Robinson, Tonga, and Yano are all eliminated. But so right now, the top tier is definitely pulling away from the pack. We have Ibushi, Naito, and Omega. Top 3 with 12, 10, and 8. Definitely is going to be interesting to see if Kenny Omega slips up, if he's going to lose to, let's see, who has he not faced yet? He hasn't faced Ibushi. He hasn't faced Ishii. I probably should look this up, but I'm just too lazy to do so. But he needs to face Ibushi, Ishii, and Yano. So I wouldn't put it past them having Yano do some shenanigans and pulling out some crazy upset on Kenny Omega, but they had a real fun match last year with the tape. I don't expect Yano to beat Omega, but Ishii, he's been having those close encounters with all these other people, and he just ends up losing. But we have to stay tuned and find out. So, Naito, I think, is still one of the favorites to win. Kenny Omega just is on fire, just hasn't lost it. So it's going to be fun to see if they do go through with this. And having Kenny go undefeated and winning the whole entire G1. I don't think it'll happen, but we'll have to stay tuned and find out. So that is it for the G1 Climax. The show that happened earlier this morning, we have a Minoru Suzuki Okada main event. which should be fantastic. Evil against Tanahashi, Michael Elgin, Bad Luck Fale, Togi Makabe, and Hangman Page, and then Yoshihashi and Jay White. So the top matches should be fun with Okada and Suzuki and Tanahashi and Evil. The undercard matches seem fun. Maybe Yoshihashi and Jay White might be a little show stealer. We'll have to see. And stay tuned and find out about that one. So next up, we have the NXT TV report. This is the first show after Tomasso Ciampa defeating Aleister Black for the championship. So that's what they did. They showed a little video package, not a little one, a pretty long one, about 3 minutes or so, talking about the Tomasso Ciampa, just going over footage about what happened in the finish. And first up, we have Heavy Machinery going up against the Mighty. Heavy Machinery goes over in 5 minutes. Good match between the two. The Street Profits came out in the middle of the match to distract. They didn't really distract anybody. They just kind of came out to the music, which was kind of weird. Why would somebody come out with their music playing during the match? Wouldn't they just stop the music? Anyways, they're in the crowd just kind of doing their thing. The Mighty gets distracted, and then Heavy Machinery picks up the victory. Haven't really seen a whole lot of the Street Profits since I've been watching NXT for the past couple months. They haven't really been on the show that much. I know they're kind of a cult favorite, probably in the same category as Enzo and Cass, just kind of overly charismatic. Haven't really seen them in the ring, so don't know if they're better than Enzo and Cass. That's not exactly a high bar. But it looks like we're going to get a Mighty Heavy Machinery Street Profits feud going forward. Maybe some sort of triple. I don't know if they're going to maybe like a triple threat match or a fatal 4-way match for the number 1 contendership for the tag team championships. So we have to stay tuned and find out what happens there. They show Candice LeRae is going to face off against Shayna Bayzler in a non-title match, and Tomasso Ciampa is scheduled to cut a promo. So next up, we have Mustache Mountain going up against Matt Knotts and Brandon Taylor in a tag team match. Mustache Mountain goes over in a few minutes. Fine match between the two. Just kind of a squash match to get Mustache Mountain's heat back. Then after the match, Trent Seven and Tyler Bate cut a promo declaring that they're going to, invoke the rematch clause. They want to have it in... Did they say they want to have it in Brooklyn? I don't really exactly remember, but basically, they said that they're going to avenge their loss, and they don't have... The Undisputed Era is trying to drive a wedge between the two, but they're still friends. So next up, we have EC3 against Kona Reeves. EC3 ends up going over in 5 minutes and 51 seconds after Velveteen Dream kind of makes a run-in on the stage, kind of talks about EC3 a little bit. They tease a distraction finish with Kona Reeves hitting the Hawaiian drop, which is just a Samoan drop, for the very believable near fall, and EC3 ends up kicking out. EC3, they do a little back and forth, and he hits the 1% for the win. Then backstage, EC3 gets interviewed, and he just kind of talks about how he's going to accept Velveteen Dream's invitation for the experience, and he talks about how that's going to end up in a match. So, outright match between the two. Promo was aight. Then next up, we have Candice LeRae against Shayna Bayzler in a non-title match. Very good match between the two. In the end, it was 7 minutes and 58 seconds, almost an 8-minute match. Baszler was dominant. Candice LeRae had her hope spots put in there. Candice LeRae was over with the crowd. She had her moments. There was no real point where we, thought that she was honestly going to win the match, but kind of a glimpse into what can happen. LeRae kind of gets in this feud with Shayna Bayzler. She ends up losing. She has to tap out to her chokehold. So we're gonna have to see and stay tuned to find out what happens with Candice LeRae going forward. Does she get? It's kind of like the Dakota Kai story. She challenges her, and then match she loses. She gets knocked down a peg or two. So does LeRae have to kind of gain her confidence back? Does she have to? What's going to happen? Because, there's not that many challengers in the women's division at this point. We have Bianca Belair, who she's kind of a heel, so that doesn't really make any sense to put her up against Baszler. Kairi Sane's going up against her right now. Nikki Cross, she's kind of in limbo in terms of, is she going to go on the main roster? Is she staying in NXT? What is she doing? Because she's been on house shows. She was on the stage when the Evolution pay-per-view was announced. There's Dakota Kai, who's kind of a lower version of Candice LeRae, I would say. And then you have the crop of talent coming up for the Mae Young Classic and the Evolution pay-per-view. So we're going to have to see what happens with all those women coming into NXT. But I still say Candice LeRae going up against Shayna Bayzler, that's a money match. I don't think Kairi Sane's going to win against Shayna Baszler. So it's going to be interesting to see how they build up other women on the roster. Post-match, Shayna Baszler goes at and puts the clutch on Candice LeRae again. The referees come out and try to get her off her, but Baszler isn't gonna let go. And then finally, Kairi Sane makes the run to save LeRae, and they kind of have a little back and forth. And Baszler, I believe she pushes Kairi, and Kairi tries to go at her, and Baszler kind of scurries away. So this was great, kind of setting up the match between the two, letting Candice LeRae kind of try to face off Baszler. Ends up coming short. So next up, Mustache Mountain. They have an interview backstage, just kind of talking about. The interviewer asked what kind of tricks do they have up their sleeves, and they said that's kind of the thing. They don't have any tricks. People think just because Undisputed Era does all these things that's what they have to do to defeat them, but they said no, they beat them at Royal Albert Hall without any tricks. They're going to do it again. And then the War Raiders confronted them, and they said it doesn't matter who wins at TakeOver, they want to get the title shots next. So War Raiders definitely out there at the top of the heap on the tag team division, so possibly as I said, a fatal 4-way, number one contendership match for the tag team championships after Brooklyn. Maybe the War Raiders just jump in line. We'll have to stay tuned to find out. Then we have William Regal backstage booking 2 matches for TakeOver. That is EC3 and the Velveteen Dream, as well as Adam Cole to defend the NXT North American Championship against Ricochet. So yeah, that should be fun to see those matches at Brooklyn. Ricochet is going to have a match next week, and Keith Lee will be debuting next week as well, so next week should be a fun in-ring show. Then Tomasso Ciampa comes out to cut his post-victory promo. Comes out, no music whatsoever. Tomasso Ciampa just kind of goes around and kind of taunts the crowd. There was this lady who was really getting into it. Don't know if she's a plant or if she's just a real mark or if she's just having fun with it. But just kind of felt like an old school heat. Just no music, just the crowd going at it. Ciampa comes in, cuts a promo talking about he deserves this. He is the greatest sports entertainer of all time. Just real subtle heel, kind of internet heel remarks that I thought was real fun to see there. He goes to this old woman that was in the front row, and he said that he remembers her, and that how does he like me? How do you like me now? And I'm the champion, and blah 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 blah. Then Aleister Black kind of comes out, and then Johnny Gargano scurries right past Aleister to try to beat up Ciampa. Ciampa ends up getting away, and then Gargano keeps telling him the only reason that he's champion is because of him, and blah blah blah. And then Aleister Black kicks him. The crowd pops for that, tells him you deserve it. And Black kind of says, yes, the only reason he is champion is because of you. So that's setting up, looks like a triple threat match at NXT Brooklyn for the championship. Probably a way to get Ciampa to scurry out with the championship without having to, pin, or without having to pin Gargano. Maybe he pins Gargano again. It's going to be fun to see what happens there. But I thought it was a really good promo by Tomasso Ciampa. We've had great promos this week from heels. We had the Samoa Joe promo. We had the Miz promo. And we had this one. Just great match. Just a great heel promo. Kind of interesting to see what they're going to do with Johnny Gargano. I'm not going to say he's going to turn heel by any means, but it just kind of seems like he's kind of playing that annoying, over-eager babyface, kind of teetering on the heel, on the edge of being annoying and the crowd not liking him. There was some Johnny Wrestling, Johnny Sucks chants. There was the You Deserve It chant after he got kicked. And there was a one more time chant. after Black cut his little promo and walked away. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do with the Gargano character, because the past couple weeks he's just been kind of deranged and kind of annoying. In the end, I thought the show was good. It wasn't on the highest of end of NXT shows, but I think just kind of taking a deep breath after the championship match last week, just kind of having some regular matches with the women's match, the tag title match, the EC3 match, or just the regular tag match. I thought it was kind of a good step forward. They set up a lot of the matches for the Brooklyn show. We still don't know exactly what's going to happen with the title picture. Is it going to be a triple threat? Is it just going to be a straight up rematch? If you put my money on it, I probably would say it's going to be a triple threat match. Keith Lee debuting next week. We heard the rumors or whatever when he did show up at the taping a few weeks ago. So next week's NXT should be fun. Speaking of fun, Total Bellas season finale, and the two big storylines on this show is Daniel Bryan making his triumphant return to wrestling, and finally Nikki Bella and John Cena call it quits. So this was honestly probably one of the most entertaining and fascinating shows or episodes of the show, just because it actually seemed real. I know I have a lot of fun with this segment, just kind of going over all the different little shenanigans that happened, but in the end, I all know that it's all kind of a work and there's all these different things. But Daniel Bryan returning, that's a shoot. John Cena and Nikki Bella breaking up. I have my hypotheses that maybe this was all just one big work for the television shows. You never know. I mean, you always got to be skeptical in the world of professional wrestling. But John Cena. So the first half is all fun and games and being all happy for Daniel Bryan. He gets the okay from the doctors, and then we go backstage to WrestleMania 34 34. Yes. For some reason, I've just been getting confused with like the last couple of WrestleManias. Ever since 33, I've been messed up. But we kind of go backstage. Daniel Bryan ends up wrestling, and then Brie Bella shows a picture or a video of Birdie watching Daniel, and he just busts out into tears. It was very emotional, probably one of the most emotional moments in Total Bellas history, just because that's kind of one of the main reasons why Bryan wanted to get back into the ring, is for his child to watch him wrestle. And obviously, she's too young to remember this, but it seems like he's going to be wrestling for at least a good couple years now, so possibly when she's 3, 4, 5 years old, she'll have a definitive memory of watching her dad wrestle in the ring. And that's one of the the main reasons that Bryan wanted to do this. And also, he's kind of one of those wrestlers who says that wrestling is his art. He doesn't have a whole lot of things he likes to do besides wrestling. And he also said that he doesn't lie a whole lot except for when he has to lie to a doctor. He's perfectly fine with doing that. So that was the first half of the show. Then the second half was Nikki calling Brie while Brie and Bryan were on their little anniversary dinner thing or lunch type thing there. Nikki just kept texting Brie, and then she calls her, and Nikki breaks the news to Brie that they're finally officially calling it off for good. They don't really get into it all that much about like the specifics of it. Nikki just kind of talks, ambiguous. I'm not going to try to say some real big word and just totally mess it up. But anyways, Nikki just kind of talks about how there's a whole bunch of different things. Like it's like the whole kids thing. It's him not being there. Nikki having to bend over backwards and do all these different things to appease him. And, I think one of the main things was that kind of John gave her like an ultimatum, like, you have to tell me by, Friday, by the end of the week, that are we going to do this or not? And Nikki just didn't want to have that pressure put on her and have, because she kind of talks about it. And John Cena has also talked about it in other videos where he, like, basically every single part of his day is planned out, like, meticulously. And that was kind of seen here where he said, tell me by this date if you want to go through with this or not. And Nikki just couldn't handle it. So then she just said no. She stays over Brie and Bryan's house, or she actually stays over. She leaves Florida, I think, goes over to San Diego, and John and her have a house there. So she was staying in his house, and she was talking about it. It was kind of weird because she was in the shower and she can like see his razor and all that other stuff. And the end of the episode and the season ends up with Nikki and Brie on the beach drinking wine, and Brie gives Nikki these beautiful little jean jackets, and each of them have best friend, or it's a heart. It's kind of like a best friend bracelet or necklace or whatever you would call it, a locket. And like, one half says best and the other one says friend, and they walk together and it says best friends. It's so cute. So that was kind of the end, and they walk away into the sunset together as best friends. So yeah, then we have the Miz and Mrs. TV report. Only a half hour, so it's kind of jam packed in there. The big story about this one was that they were throwing a baby shower for old Monroe Sky. In the beginning, they showed Maryse's mom the naked pictures, or the implied nude photos that the Miz took, and she was laughing, and they're having a good old time with that. And then they go in to the cake shop, and Maryse wants this $1,000 4-layer cake, and then the Miz was like, "Why are we getting a $1,000 cake when we can just go to, the grocery store and get one for $30?" So they end up getting like a 3-layer $750 cake, and then Mrs. Dad comes in from Cleveland, and he picks them up, and they say, "Oh, why don't you pick up the cake instead of having to deliver it and pay all this extra money?" So they do, and then of course shenanigans ensues to where the Miz ends up having to slam on his brakes, and the cake comes falling over, and they break the cake, and he has to go with his tail tucked between his legs and go back to the cake shop and ask them if they can redo the cake, and instead of doing the 3-layer cake, if they can do the cake Maryse actually wanted, and instead of spending $1,000, he told them, "Can you do it for $2,000 and do it by the other day?" And of course they said yes, because they wouldn't put that on the show if they didn't do it. And so instead of spending $1,000 or $1,200, because I think the delivery fee was a couple hundred, the Miz ends up spending close to $3,000 on a cake that nobody ate. That was the big reveal at the end of the show. That post credits, they come back and Miz asks the audience, how much cake we still have. All of it, because nobody ate it, and that's kind of a fun little thing at the end. But so yeah, the whole thing was just basically their baby shower. Some cameos from Dolph Ziggler. I think John Morrison was there. Avril Lavigne was there. The president, or the principal from Saved by the Bell, was there. So some celebrities were at Chateau Marmiz, which is what they call their house. Kind of the last big hoorah for their house before they move over to Austin. And so that was the second episode of Miz and Mrs. And that'll do it for this week for Under the Radar. Thank you all very much for listening. Don't forget to listen to the Bulletcast tomorrow on Friday, and listen to my other show that I do, Curveballs and Sure Shots with Dominic. I talk about sports, I talk about wrestling. Big week. Football starts off today. We have the preseason start with the Hall of Fame game. Lamar Jackson going to get some reps with the Ravens. That should be fun. The my Oakland A's are tied for the second wild card spot with the Mariners. It's a fun time. Went to the A's game yesterday. It was a good time. Got a little sunburnt because my dumb ass didn't want to wear sunscreen, but kind of paid the price for that. Not too bad, but took a shower this morning, and the water kind of hurt when it fell on my burnt arms. But that'll do it for me for today. Thank you all very much for partaking in this audio. Don't forget to follow Bulletcast on Instagram and Twitter. Leave a comment or a question or something. Email us at bulletcast2, that's the number 2, sweet, at gmail.com. Email us, ask us some questions, and possibly your question will be featured on our fan mail segment. Don't exactly know. I don't run the fan mail. I don't look at the mailbag, so I don't know exactly how many questions we still have left. So, send in those questions, and you'll probably be on the show sooner or later. So thank you, goodbye, and good night. Bye.